cold marble floor bit into Wayne's knees, but she didn't flinch. The guards forced her down in front of Mr. Kim, their grip raising yet she refused to bow her head. The room was filled with the heavy presence of mafia men, their gazes pointing into her like predators, watching their prey. But Wayne had been raised by warriors. Her father and brothers had taught her that dignity was never to be discarded, no matter the circumstance. The large double doors creaked open behind her, and hushed whispers filled the room. The weight of curiosity and expectation pressed down on her. Then Mr. Kim's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Who is going to take her? The room remained still for a moment before murmurs erupted. I want her. I'll take her. The vultures were circling. Wayne's fingers curled into fists, nails sticking into her palms. Then a deep commanding voice echoed through the room, silencing everyone instantly. I take her as my slave. A chill ran down Wayne's spine as Tim stepped forward from behind his father. His gaze was dark, unreadable, and suffocating. The entire room fell into an eerie silence. No one dared to speak in front of him. Mr. Kim gave him a single nod of approval. Dread sank into one's stomach. Her fate had been sealed. Tim stopped before her, towering over her kneeling form. His presence was suffocating, yet she met his gaze, unyielding. His eyes flickered with something unreadable before he turned to the guards. Release her. The guards hesitated for a split second before obeying. Wayne slowly rose to her feet, her legs trembling, but she forced herself to stand tall. Follow me. Tim's voice was calm, emotionless, but it was an order, not a request. Wayne's heart pounded as she followed him out. Each step felt heavier than last. She knew what awaited slaves in this world: abuse, torment, and death. She would rather die than live that life. The car ride was suffocating. Tim sat beside her, his face turned away, radiating cold indifference. The city lights blurred outside the window, but Wayne barely noticed. Her mind was spinning, searching for an escape. Her hand slowly reached for the door handle. If she jumped out now, she could end this before it even began. She could die with dignity, but before she could even pull it open, a cold voice froze her in place. Don't even think about it. She turned to him in shock, his sharp profile remained emotionless as he continued. If you want me to keep your father alive. Her breath hissed. Her father was alive. Her hands trembled as she clenched them into fists. He was using her father as a leash to chain her, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she turned her face away, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. She refused to cry in front of him. When they arrived at Thane's mansion, Wayne followed him inside, her heart hammering. A woman stood in the grand hall, smiling sweetly at Thane. Her features were soft, but there was something sinister in her eyes. Thane, you're back. Thane barely acknowledged her, nodding curtly. Imo, this is Wayne. I'm leaving her to you. Take care of her. He muttered before answering the call and walking off. Marina smiled at Wayne and gripped Wayne's arm with surprising strength, her nails digging into her skin. Let me show you your room. She dragged Wayne. The princess of the Han family. She sneered. I'm nothing but my nephew's slave. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Wayne didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, tilting her head. It's funny how you say that, as if you aren't just living under his roof. The woman's smile twitched. Still got a sharp tongue. I see. She dragged Wayne down the hall, leading her into a small dimly lit room. The stench of dust filled the air. There was no bed, only a worn-out mattress with torn fabric pushed against the corners. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling. It was barely livable. This will be your room, she said mockingly. Of course a slave doesn't need luxury. Wayne looked around and chuckled. Have seen worse, but I suppose you wouldn't understand. You have never had to survive on your own, have you? Marina stiffened, her fake smile dropping. Watch your mouth, girl. Wayne stepped closer, lowering her voice. Or what? You'll have him punish me. Let me tell you something. Men like him don't like women who run their mouths too much. Marina's face turned red with fury. Wayne smiled. Now if you are done gloating, I would like to get some sleep. Before the woman could respond, Wayne turned her back on her and walked toward the mattress, plopping down as if she owned the place. Marina huffed in anger before storming out, slamming the door behind her. As soon as she was alone, Wayne let out a slow breath, her hands gripping the torn sheets. She had put on a brave front, but inside she was terrified. She didn't know what was worse, being a slave or belonging to Taehyung. Few days later, the rag in Wayne's hand felt heavier with each swipe across the nightstand. Her arms ached, her back screamed in protest, but she pushed through it. Days of relentless work had drained her strength, but Marina wasn't satisfied yet. Taehyung's aunt had been making her scrub floors, lift heavy furniture, and work endlessly without rest since the moment he left the mansion. Wayne had no idea where he had gone, but his absence had given Marina the freedom to treat her like nothing more than filth beneath her feet. Now at this ungodly hour, Wayne was forced to clean the woman's room while she lounged in the bathroom. Wayne's eyelids drooped. She wiped the furniture absent-mindedly, her body swaying from exhaustion. "That old hag," she muttered under her breath, "making me do this shit at this hour." Before she could grumble more, the door to the room swung open. Wayne turned quickly, startled. Her breath caught in her throat. Taehyung. His tall frame filled the doorway, his broad shoulders relaxed as he loosened his tie. His black dress shirt clung to his body, the first few buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of his collarbones. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice husky from exhaustion. "Emo!" His deep voice rang out, calling for his aunt. Wayne's heart dropped. Her face pale as a horrifying thought crossed her mind. Is this why she called me here? Is this why she's taking forever in the bathroom? She felt sick. Her breathing turned shallow as she instinctively took a step back. Taehyung's gaze landed on her, confusion flickering across his face. He frowned. "What are you doing here?" Wayne didn't answer. Her body went rigid as he stepped inside, his tall frame moving toward her. She retreated, her feet shuffling backward until she hit the wall. Her breath came in quick, uneven pants as she pressed herself against it. Her horrified expression didn't go unnoticed. Taehyung blinked, his gaze softened for a moment. "Am I that horrible?" He cleared his throat and stopped a few feet away from her. His eyes dropped to the cloth in her hand. "What are you doing at this hour?" Before Wayne could open her mouth, Marina's voice rang out from the bathroom. "Taehyung." Taehyung sighed, running a hand through his hair before turning toward the bathroom door. "Emo Dad sent this." He reached into his coat and pulled out a file. "It has all the information about Gilbert's assets." Marina stepped out, her face dropping at the mention of Gilbert. Her teary eyes looked onto the file as she took it from him. Tam barely acknowledged her reaction. He simply patted her shoulder. "I'll be in my room." As he turned to leave, his gaze flickered back to Wayne. The moment the door closed behind him, Marina's demeanor changed. With a sharp movement, she threw the file on the bed and turned to Wayne, her face twisting in anger. "You little wretch!" She spat, marching toward her. Wayne's fingers tightened around the rag, bracing herself. "Every time I see your face, it reminds me of your filthy father." Marina sneered. "He killed my son, and yet you have the audacity to stand here." Marina raised her hand and slapped Wayne across the face. Wayne's jaw clenched, her exhaustion, her pain, her suppressed rage, all of it boiled over. Before she could stop herself, her hand lashed out. A loud smack echoed through the room. Marina's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning red from the force of Wayne's slap. Silence fell between them. Then Wayne spoke, her voice eerily calm but filled with venom. "And your bastard son killed my two brothers. Who will settle that account?" Marina's nostrils flared. Wayne took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "My father broke the rules of the mafia world to avenge his sons. He destroyed everything because of that pathetic, spineless excuse of a man, Gilbert." Marina's face darkened. Wayne didn't stop, her voice grew colder. "If my father hadn't killed him, I swear I would have." She tilted her head, her lips curling into a smirk. "I would have ripped his heart out myself." Marina's breath hitched. She hadn't expected this, not from a so-called slave. For a moment she was speechless. But she quickly composed herself, her lips twisting into a cruel smile. "What do you think Taehyung will do if I tell him you had the audacity to hit me?" Wayne's heart sank for a split second, but she quickly masked her emotions, lifting her chin. "I have nothing to lose," she smiled. "Even if you tell him, do you really think he would believe a helpless slave could do such a thing?" Marina gritted her teeth, her fists trembling at her sides. "Out!" Wayne chuckled, picking up the rag and tossing it onto Marina's face. "Sweet dreams, Emo." Then without another glance, she walked out, her head held high. Time skipped. The fever had drained every last ounce of strength from Wayne's body. For 2 days she had borne under its relentless heat, but Marina's cruelty knew no bounds. Not once did she let Wayne rest. If anything, Marina seemed to take pleasure in pushing her to the brink of exhaustion, assigning her task after task, making sure she barely had a moment to breathe. Tonight was no different. Taehyung's guests had arrived at the mansion, but he wasn't home, so without a second thought, Marina had left Wayne alone with them, ignoring her weak state. Wayne stood before the two older men, their beady eyes watching her too intently as she placed their tea on the table. She swallowed, her fingers twitched at her sides. Her fever made her head heavy, her vision slightly hazy. The room felt suffocating, their stares making her stomach churn in discomfort. A shiver ran down her spine as they whispered to each other. She tensed her grip, tightening on her dress. Just then one of them stood up. "I need to use the washroom." Wayne immediately nodded, eager to put some distance between them. She said, turning quickly. She led him down the hallway, keeping her gaze fixed ahead. But the man suddenly stopped. Wayne turned slightly confused until she saw the twisted smirk on his face. "You are a delicate thing, aren't you?" He mused, his voice thick with something that made Wayne's blood run cold. She clenched her jaw, willing her body not to tremble. "No wonder Han kept you hidden. He must have wanted to keep this treasure all to himself." "I didn't know Han's little princess was so beautiful up close." His voice was thick with lust. "Tell me, darling, how does it feel to be left here as a married slave?" One's stomach twisted violently. She took a step back. "The washroom is this way," she said firmly, trying to mask the tremble in her voice. But before she could move, the other man appeared behind her. Feisty little thing. His eyes raked over her, making her skin crawl. "You should be grateful, you know. Not everyone gets to be touched by men of our stature." Wayne felt sick. Her fever made her too weak to fight back properly, but she clenched her fist. "Stay away from me." The man only chuckled. "You're just a discarded thing, aren't you? No one would care if we had a little fun." Wayne turned sharply to leave, but a rough hand grabbed her waist. Her heart stopped. "Let go," she protested, trying to yank her hand free, but the man only tightened his grip, dragging her closer. The other man laughed. "Oh, she's a fighter. I love that." "Let me go." Wayne struggled, her fevered body barely able to resist as she kicked him. The first man sneered. "Don't be difficult, sweetheart. We were planning to share." A deep guttural growl echoed through the hallway. The air turned suffocating. Wayne barely had the strength to turn her head before she saw Taehyung. He stood at the end of the hallway, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. His sharp jaw was clenched, his dark eyes ablaze with pure fury. The men froze. Before they could react, Taehyung moved. In a flash, he was upon them. He grabbed the man holding Wayne and shoved him so hard he slammed into the wall, gasping. The other one barely had time to react before Taehyung's fist connected with his face, sending him sprawling to the ground. Wayne stumbled back, her breath shaky as Taehyung immediately positioned himself in front of her. His broad back shielded her from view, his entire being radiating lethal rage. His voice was deadly when he spoke. "How dare you?" The men shivered in fear. "Hear us out, Master King." "Shut up." Taehyung's voice was like ice, his glare burning through them. "You dared to harass a woman under my roof." The men scrambled. "It was Miss Marina. She brought us here. She said you didn't need her, and we could have her." Taehyung's jaw locked. A chilling silence filled the air before his voice dropped to a little growl. "Marina." In a few moments, the woman strolled in, feigning innocence. "What's all this yelling about?" The men turned to her desperately. "Help us, you promised." Marina scoffed, crossing her arms. "I don't even know them." Taehyung's eyes darkened. "Take them to the basement," he ordered his men. "I'll settle accounts later." The guards immediately seized the struggling men and dragged them away. Then Taehyung turned to Wayne. Her entire body swayed. His breath hissed as he caught her just in time, his hand steadying her weak frame. His eyes widened. "You're burning up." He shot a death glare at Marina. "I told you to take care of her. Is this how you do it?" Marina scoffed. "She's just a slave." "Shut your damn mouth." His voice was slow and venomous. Wayne's vision blurred. The last thing she felt was Taehyung's arms lifting her effortlessly, cradling her against his warm chest. His voice was sharp as he barked at the maids. "Call the doctor now. And which room is hers?" The hesitant reply made his blood boil. "The storage room." Taehyung froze, his grip on Wayne tightened. "What?" His voice was dangerously quiet. The maid flinched. "Madam Marina said she didn't need a room." Taehyung turned his furious glare to Marina. His voice was deathly soft. "I'll settle accounts with you later." Then, without another word, he carried Wayne away. The doctor pressed his fingers against Wayne's face, checking her pulse before sighing. "She has a high fever. She needs complete rest. It seems like she has been overworking herself lately." He sat at the edge of the bed, his sharp eyes narrowing as he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. His jaw clenched as he turned to the maid standing near the door. Why is her condition like this? His voice was quiet, but the deadly edge in his tone made the maid sure. She lowered her head, her hands trembling. Master, Miss Marina made her do all the housework. A deadly silence filled the room. His fingers curled into fists as his gaze darkened. Bring Marina now. The maid scurried out of the room. A few moments later, Marina walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. She didn't even glance at Taehyung at first. Her glare was fixed solely on mine, who had just begun to stir awake. Taehyung immediately noticed his gaze snapped to his aunt, a dangerous fire burning in his eyes. Why did you do this? His voice was deep laced with restrained fury. You knew I like her. How precious she is to me, yet you treated her inhumanly. Why? Marina scoffed, crossing her arms. Every time I see her face, it reminds me of how brutally her father killed my Gilbert. One's heart stopped. She looked between them, confused, but Taehyung was already gritting his teeth. It was Gilbert's fault. His voice was slow, almost a growl. He called death upon himself. Why don't you talk about how he murdered Wine's brothers? Marina snapped, her face twisting with rage. You dare bring that up? That bastard father of hers took away my son from me. I should have let her rot instead of giving her a roof to sleep under. Taehyung's muscles tensed, his sharp jaw taking in badly restrained rage. Shut your mouth. His voice was dangerously quiet, yet it sent a chill down Marina's spine. Marina scoffed. Why? Because she's your new favorite toy. Don't forget who raised him. Before she could finish, Taehyung grabbed her by the neck, making her gasp. I told you to shut your damn mouth. Dad already warned you to leave this matter alone. Wine's father didn't kill Gilbert unjustly, yet you still hold on to this hatred like a leech. Marina cursed Wine again, her eyes blazing with venom. Taehyung had enough. He grabbed her arm, yanked the door open, and showed her how to get out. His voice was deadly whisper. You're never stepping foot in this house again. Marina stumbled but straightened herself, her face twisting in fury. You'll regret this, Taehyung. But Taehyung didn't even spare her another glance. He slammed the door shut. A heavy silence followed. After a few minutes, he walked back to the bed, his tall frame sinking into the chair beside Wine. His intimidating presence softened just a little when his gaze met hers. Wine hesitated before whispering, Where am I? Taehyung sighed, In my room. Her lips parted in surprise, but before she could say anything, he ran a hand through his hair and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I'm sorry, Wine. His voice was quieter now, regret laced in his tone. For leaving you in her hands, for being oblivious to everything she put you through. I didn't know she will treat you like this. You were scared of me, so I thought I should keep a distance between us, but I didn't know she would do this. Wine blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. She shook her head weakly. It's okay. Then exhaled sharply, then straightened. No, it's not. His dark eyes bored into hers. I can do anything to compensate for it. Wine thought for a moment, her mind still foggy from the fever. Then she whispered, I want to see my father. Taehyung stilled. His gaze lingered on her face. Unreadable before he sighed and leaned back. These days I have been busy with work. His voice was thoughtful. I'm just waiting to take my father's position, then I'll bring your father to you. His dark eyes softened. Just a few more days, okay? Wine nodded slowly, a small smile gracing her lips. Thank you. Taehyung's lips twitched. You don't have to thank me. Wine hesitated, watching him closely. Then before she could stop herself, spoke her thoughts aloud. He's not as scary and bad as I thought. In fact, he's cute. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, amused. She swallowed, looking away. A slow smoke curled Taehyung's lips. Wine cursed herself inwardly. His deep chuckle made her stomach flip. Cute, he leaned forward slightly, his face dangerously close to hers. Wine's breath hitched. His smile deepened as he whispered, You must really be sick if you're seeing things like that. Wine's face burned. Forget I said anything. She quickly turned her face away, burying herself under the blanket. Taehyung chuckled again, shaking his head. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he stood up, adjusting the blanket over her. As she drifted off to sleep, the last thing she felt was the warmth of his fingers grazing her forehead gently. Few days later, Wine stood by the window, her fingers lightly grazing the cold glass as she gazed outside. The world beyond was vast, but her thoughts were fixated on a single person, Taehyung. A small smile unknowingly formed on her lips as she recalled the way his ears turned red when he got flustered, how he looked away when she caught him staring, how he covered her with a blanket when he thought she was asleep. Who would have thought the ruthless Taehyung had such a side? Before she could dwell on it further, a firm knock on the door echoed through the room, followed by the deep voice that had occupied her thoughts. Wine. She turned around quickly, her heart skipping a beat. Taehyung stood in the doorway, his dark eyes locked onto her. dressed in all-black suit, his presence radiated power, the new ruler of the mafia world. But instead of his usual intimidating aura, there was a gentleness in his smile. "I hope I didn't disturb you." His voice was smooth, holding a teasing lilt. Wine's eyes softened. "You didn't." He took a step forward. "I brought someone to meet you." Before Wine could process his words, a familiar figure appeared from behind him. Her breath caught. "Dad?" Mr. Hen stood before her, slightly thinner, his face showing signs of hardship, but very much alive. Tears welled up in her eyes as she ran forward, her voice breaking. "Dad!" She threw herself into his arms, sobbing into his shoulder as his strong, familiar hands held her tightly. "Wine," Mr. Hen whispered, his voice trembling as he stroked her hair. "My little girl." Tim watched silently, a rare warmth in his gaze as the father and daughter reunited. "I thought you," Wine choked, gripping onto him. "I thought I lost you." Mr. Hen shook his head, his voice soothing. "I missed you so much, my child. I wanted to come for you earlier, but I couldn't." Wine pulled back, covering his face with her shaky hands. "You have gotten thinner and weak." Her father smiled gently. "I'll be fine now that I have you." Tim turned to step away, giving them privacy. For the next few good minutes, Wine and her father spoke, catching up on everything they had missed. She told him about what happened, and he reassured her, holding her hand like he used to when she was a child. After a while, the door creaked open again. Then stepped inside, his gaze settling on Wine, who was now resting her head on her father's shoulder. "Mr. Hen," he spoke, his tone respectful. "I have prepared a room for you, if you'd like to rest." Mr. Hen nodded, looking at his daughter. "I'll sleep for a while. You should rest too, Wine." He turned to Taehyung, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter, and for keeping me safe." Taehyung gave a small nod. It was necessary. Mr. Hen walked out, with Taehyung followed behind him, but before Taehyung could leave completely. "Taehyung," he stopped. Wine stood there, her lips parted as if hesitating. Then with a soft voice she said, "Thank you for saving my dad." Taehyung tilted his head, watching her. Then hesitantly she added. Her cheeks burned slightly. "I mean, I know why you are taking care of me." Taehyung's gaze sharpened, his lips curved into a smirk as he slowly stepped closer, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Oh." His voice dropped an octave, teasing. "Then tell me, Wine, why am I taking care of you?" Her face turned red. "I mean," she stammered, looking away. His smirk widened. "You think about me that much?" Wine glared at him, flustered. "That's not what I meant." Taehyung chuckled deeply before leaning in slightly, his breath warm against her ear. "For your father," he whispered. "Your grandfather saved my father once. My father owed him a life debt. This was the perfect moment to repay it. That's why your father was kept hidden because he broke the rules." Wine nodded, taking a deep breath. She was about to say something when Taehyung suddenly leaned in, his face inches from hers. "And what do you think about me, Wine?" His voice was slow, teasing, intimate. Wine's breath hitched. "What?" Taehyung smirked, eyes glinting mischievously. "You said you know why I'm taking care of you. So what do you think about me?" Wine's face burned. She clenched her fist and looked at him in the eye. "I think you are annoying." Then burst into laughter. His deep chuckle sending shivers down her spine. "That's not what your face says." He raised an eyebrow. Wine huffed. "And your face turns red when I tease you, so I guess we are even." Taehyung grinned, shaking his head. But then his expression softened, turning serious. His voice dropped. "Wine." She looked up at him, surprised at the sudden change in his tone. "I'm sorry." Her lips parted. Taehyung exhaled. "For taking you as a slave in front of everyone." His jaw clenched. "I didn't mean it. It was just a way to keep you safe." Wine's heart pounded. "I didn't know my aunt would treat you like that." His voice was slow, filled with genuine regret. "I should have protected you better." Wine swallowed. She sighed softly. "It was bad, but it's okay since you didn't know." Then stared at her for a moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he smirked again. "You really think I'm cute, don't you?" Wine groaned. "I take it back." Then just as Wine realized what she had done and was about to step back, his deep voice whispered against her hair, "Thank you for trusting me, Wine." Her eyes widened. Slowly her hands reached up, clutching onto the fabric of his shirt. Time skip. Taehyung's grip tightened around Wine's hand. Still clad in their wedding attire, he led her toward the same hall where he had once taken her as a slave. Wine frowned slightly, glancing up at him. "Why are we here?" she asked, curiosity laced in her tone. Then passed her a small smile before bringing their intertwined hands up, brushing his lips against her soft skin. "You'll know soon, sweetheart," he murmured, his deep voice sending warmth down her spine. As they stepped into the hall, the air changed. The same people who had witnessed her humiliation months ago now stood in stunned silence. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Taehyung walked forward, his posture radiating dominance. But mine wasn't the trembling girl she was that day. Today she stood tall beside Taehyung, her wedding dress shimmering under the lights, her chin lifted with quiet strength. Taehyung stopped in front of them all, his fingers laced with hers. His voice rang with power. "This," he said, pulling mine closer, "is my wife. With all due respect, I expect everyone to treat her as such. She's no longer a slave, she's my queen." Gas filled the hall. Even Marina, who had once tormented Wine, lowered her head in submission. One by one the crowd bowed slightly, murmuring a greeting to Wine. But then a scoff cut through the reverence. "How can a married slave become the wife of the Mafia king?" A man sneered from the back. Taehyung's gaze snapped toward him, dark and lethal. His grip on Wine's hand remained gentle, but his body radiated fury. "Do you have a death wish?" Taehyung's voice was quiet, but the danger in it made the man shudder. Taehyung's father stepped forward, his presence commanding. "The decision has been made. My son rules this empire now. His word is law." His mother, standing beside him, smiled warmly at Wine. "Wine is our daughter-in-law now. Show respect." Even Taehyung's younger brother and sister chimed in, standing by their family under the weight of their glares. The man hesitated before bowing his head. "I apologize," Taehyung coughed. "If I hear one more word against my wife, I won't be so forgiving next time." Wine's eyes found her father standing in the corner, his proud and teary gaze making her heart ache with love. She smiled softly, and he gave her a small nod, as if silently telling her, "You deserve this respect." With that, Taehyung turned to her, pressing a soft kiss to her temple before whispering, "Let's go home, love." The moment they stepped into their bedroom, Wine let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head in disbelief. Taehyung raised a brow. "What's funny?" She turned to face him, eyes twinkling. "You really did that. You made everyone acknowledge me." Taehyung smirked, stepping closer, his fingers grazing her waist before pulling her into his arms. "Of course I did. You're my wife, Wine, and I don't care who agrees or not. All that matters is us." Wine's heart swelled at his words. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling his familiar scent. "Thank you," she murmured. Taehyung exhaled softly, his hands running down her back, pressing her closer. "No, love, thank you for trusting me." Wine slowly pulled back, biting her lip as she hesitated. "But I'm worried for my father. He's living alone now. What if someone tries to harm him? Not everyone is happy about our marriage." Taehyung cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "No one can touch him under my watch. I promise, Wine. Your father is safe." His voice dropped to a whisper as he kissed the tip of her nose. "And don't let anyone else's opinion bother you. We are happy, that's all that matters." Wine smiled at him. "But then you haven't told me yet. When did you saw me first?" He smiled. "Once I came to your house and saw you playing basketball with your brothers." Wine's face dropped at the mention of her brothers. "See, that's why I wasn't telling you that. I knew it would make you sad." Wine smiled, shaking her head, looking up at him. "How can you be a Mafia king and have such a kind heart?" Taehyung laughed, pressing his forehead against hers. "You haven't seen my father yet. The former great Mafia king who obediently cooks for my mother and gets scolded without arguing back." Wine giggled freely. He leaned in closer, brushing his lips along her jawline, making her shiver. "And just so you know, I wouldn't mind being that kind of husband for you." Wine's face turned crimson. "Stop teasing me." "But you love it," Taehyung murmured, his lips ghosting over hers before he smirked. "Admit it, Mrs. Kim." Wine huffed, playfully showing his chest. "You're annoying." Taehyung chuckled, easily pulling her back against him, his arms wrapped around her waist. "And you're adorable." Wine sighed happily, resting her head against his chest. They stood there in silence for a moment, trapped in each other's warmth. After a beat, Taehyung whispered, "Are you happy, love?" Wine smiled, tilting her head up to look at him more than I ever thought I could be. Taehyung's heart melted at her words. He lifted her off the ground, making her squeal as he twirled her around. Laughter filled the room. Wine wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned down, kissing his lips.